Hi guys, this is Salinas from We Are the Voice for the Silence and Afflicted. I went Facebook Live yesterday. I'm actually trying to do an update on yesterday for anybody that happened to see the video and was unable to hear the CPS worker. It was kind of really upsetting and disturbing to hear some of the things that came out of the caseworker's mouth. And he was very blatant about how he clearly felt, and it's not surprising. Some of them are pretty secretive. They're pretty much snakes in my eyes, and they will do anything to criminalize the protective parent instead of standing up for what's truly right. And again, like I said, it's pretty appalling. So in my recent Facebook Live, which was yesterday, I do apologize again for the audio that was in there. I didn't have enough time to set up my podcast like I usually do, so people were able to hear what was actually going on, but I'm pretty much going to explain that. So pretty much recently, as far as court is concerned, my court date had ended March 3rd and the 5th, which was supposed to be a full hearing, which I was not given due process, even though Dad was, from 11 o'clock to 4 o'clock. Within the court date adjourning to March 5th, that Friday, we were supposed to close with, you know, Dad being held accountable for his actions and the bruising of my 5-year-old son, along with my evidence being provided to show the courts with respect as far as credible evidence to prove that it's just not hearsay, but, you know, through legal documentation, as far as doctors, hospitals, and media care, which we had provided along with pictures and recordings proving that Dad is unstable and extremely violent to even be around my son unattended. Of course, in the court hearing, unfortunately, my evidence was clearly not provided at that time. I was abruptly interrupted by the judge multiple times when I had tried to speak. I wasn't given the same respect as Dad was, and pretty much my hearing seemed as if it was revolving around Dad's past domestic violence history with his other relationships, along with the abuse that his other children, 7 other children, mind you, had endured. Dad openly admitted in court for corporal punishment, along with agreeing that 2 of his children, that are much older now, were taken away from him and adopted out. And although that information was provided through his testimony, and, you know, he didn't deny any of it, eyebrows didn't seem to be raised as far as what type of person, parent, or character he was to include my child's safety, along with, again, the bruising that he had inflicted on my child during visitations. To just recap on some of that for anyone that hasn't watched any of my podcasts in the beginning, Dad is very abusive, and each weekend pretty much are weeks where my child would come home with extensive bruisings, no other indication as far as, you know, abrasions on any parts of his body that would prove that my child, you know, had fallen as any typical child would. These were bruisings that, again, were extremely extensive and can clearly tell that they were inflicted by Dad. Pretty much each weekend, what I would do is my son would go home, I would look him over, I would take a picture, I would call the cops, and the cops would call CPS. They would take their own picture, write a report. CPS would come, and they would take a picture as well and write their report. Within all that happening as well, I would also, depending on the time, either take my son to the doctors, either the immediate care or the emergency room. And this pretty much happened throughout the whole summer, and it was pretty repetitive. And each time my son was treated, he was indicated through the doctors as child abuse inflicted injuries. Again, each time that had happened prior to the hearing, myself and lawyer would try to motion a petition for a modification to either suspend and or seek supervised visitations through Catholic Charities, which is provided here in our county for parents that are unsafe around their children, or an order of protection. And each and every time that information that was provided to the judge, she had refused to pay attention to any of those signs or any documents providing that Dad was abusive to my child. And in which that happened, she had continued to give him more time, as if in retaliation for me standing up and protecting my son. And I think what bothers me the most is, you know, there's parents out there that are getting their children taken away for way less. For instance, not taking their children to the doctors or not seeking medical attention. And I did everything that I needed to do to provide that, you know, not only my child was being protected, but sought the proper medical attention, you know, to make sure if there was any other steps that I needed to do for his health, I was willing to do so. And each and every time I had stepped in to do that, as a normal parent would, I was pushed into the corner and basically wasn't helped whatsoever. So anyways, leading back up to March 5th, the hearing, which was supposed to be the closing date, the night before, my lawyer had called me and had explained to me, well, technically pleaded with me not to continue the hearing, or else my child would be taken and given to the abuser, which you can clearly understand my confusion on it, because again, I did everything that I needed to do to prove Dad was an abuser, and I'm being backed again into the corner as if what I'm doing is wrong and a criminal act. She, no matter what I said or asked why and in what form and how come, she just basically would state that the judge is steering in Dad's direction for whatever reason. So I basically felt as if I was being intimidated and threatened that if I do continue hearing, that, like she stated, my son would be taken and given to the abuser. So of course I had no choice but to agree to the stipulation that they had clearly written up, knowing that this was going to go in this direction anyways, as if it was already pre-planned and they already knew that we weren't going to continue with the hearing. I agreed to the stipulation, although it was very upsetting, because basically agreeing to the stipulation was meaning that Dad was still not going to be held accountable. Dad was going to get numerous amounts of visitations unsupervised, you know, not only just on, you know, one day, but during the weekend. He would get every weekend and alternate weekends. So whatever weekend he didn't have Friday, Saturday, Sunday, he would be doing Friday, Saturday. And then she also included in there 2 7 non-consecutive weeks in the summer that he would have, along with allowing him to take my son out of Western New York, our county and or state. Again, very alarming due to the abuse that my child has already endured. You know, I can't even trust him here in our county, and you're willing to allow him to take off somewhere out of another state and out of the jurisdiction. So as court had ended and we had agreed to the stipulation, literally that same day of the hearing, Dad was beating and knocking on my door. And in the court stipulation, it has states that, you know, both parties have to abide by visitations accordingly and respectfully. Both parties should refrain from using any volatile behavior and or verbal abusive language towards one another. And no sooner did I clock off from the Zoom meeting for the hearing, Dad was already beating at my door, demanding for his son. Although in the courts we had agreed Dad was going to pick the baby up the next day. Already in violation in the court order. So basically what I have done since then is just pretty much mark down everything that he has done so far in a journal with a time and a date. I have print-ups of email, text messages, and anything else that would include in that. Just so when I do go in and violate him, the judge can't say, well, you're coming in periodically or once a week and this is what you're doing and now you're just causing problems. So I just figured, let me make a journal. When I do go in to violate him, I can write it all down, excuse me. And hopefully I can be heard and go from there. So after that day, we had a couple other incidents that have happened. Well, quite a few actually, excuse me. The next incident was Dad was zooming up and down my street consistently, just periodically throughout the week. There's times that he's had friends in his car and they would hoot and holler as I was on the porch, either with myself or with my son. There was the one time that my 17-year-old daughter was driving on one of the main streets here, and she had noticed that he had first zoomed in front of her as if to cut her off, and then he zoomed back into another lane. They locked eyes, and he zoomed back in front of her again, which could have caused a severe accident. We did make a report about that. The incident after that was Dad had his 7 non-consecutive weeks and was uninterrupted as state court ordered, excuse me. Oh, I'm sorry. Before that, Dad was supposed to return my son home for a weekend visit. It was his alternate weekend, and instead of returning my son home at 6 o'clock, he refused to answer the phone. I did give him an hour of grace period prior to, setting any alarms off or, calling the police, which I thought was extremely lenient, especially being that it's a court order for both of our times to abide by. I waited an hour. I had messaged Dad through email and text message, and Dad had no response. I also called, and he refused to answer. 2 hours went by, and the same thing happened until I had to call the cops. No parent should have to worry, and I feel so heartbroken that no parent should ever have to file a missing report on their children or feel as if their child is not going to return, or God forbid something else has happened. And that reality hit very quick that night. Again, it's very emotional knowing everything that my child has already endured with this man, and he's never been held accountable. So when that happened, you can understand, you can understand that my emotions were increasingly heightened. After the second hour, I did call the cops, and I explained to them there was a court order which I had provided stating that Dad refused to bring my son home. There was no call of being, or message stating that he would be late. There was no response whatsoever. So this was being done intentionally, of course. While the police were there taking my report, Dad happened to drive by the house, and the police officer had advised me he might be one of those guys that just doesn't like the police, and, here's the incident number, just call back in an hour and we'll check to see if he returned the child home. Of course, we agreed. We had no choice. And in the midst of this, there was an off-duty cop with his wife that had witnessed all this, mind you, as well, sitting at the side of the road. So the cop left, and we were hoping and assuming that Dad would come back and drop my child off. And really at that point, I didn't care whether, what the reason was that he was late. I just wanted to know that my son was okay and that he was safe and he was home. Dad had continued for hours, zooming, speeding down my street, up and down my street. And I live on a side street, so the speed limit is very low. It's not even 30 miles per hour on the street. So, again, there was one point that actually I happened to be coming down out of the house and coming out the driveway, and no sooner did I almost put my foot into the street, and there went Dad speeding recklessly with my 5-year-old child in the car. And thank God I didn't step out when I did, because myself and unborn child would have been literally swiped off at the side of the road. At that point, the off-duty cop had witnessed what was going on and did a U-turn to try to follow Dad. Unfortunately, by the time he got to the end of the street, he didn't know which way Dad had went. Within this happening, we had called the cops again because a couple hours had went by and explained to them that Dad has already stopped many times First he zoomed down the street, and then he would stop in front of the house and refuse to give us the baby. And that he is continuously doing this and driving recklessly with our child. And basically we were just told that the report is made. We would have to wait for a cop to come out to make another report, basically, at this time. I would say probably around 10:30, close to 11 o'clock, is when Dad finally actually came back down the street, and my child was in the car. Thankfully, my son was safe. It doesn't exclude emotionally what he probably dealt with. I'm sure he was traumatized and scared, especially seeing, you know, most of his family and friends standing out in the driveway waiting for him to return home. He knew he was supposed to return home. And again, Dad just continued to drive past. My son returned home safe. We got him in the house. The cops basically wound up coming around 11:30, and I explained to them that, yes, my son did return home, but I still wanted to write a report as far as, you know, the incident that had happened pretty much the whole night. They had provided me another incident report and stated that Special Victims Unit would be reaching out to me and speak to me about what had happened. A few days later, well, I shouldn't say a few days later, today actually, from today, a few days later, Dad was coming over, and I don't even know why, because we had already spoken in the morning time, and he knew that it was my 7-day unconsecutive week with my child, and he wanted to come pick up his child. And again, we have court orders. He has the same order as I do. I don't feel as if that I need to be his personal secretary and continuously remind him of the court order, let alone time frames or conversations that we have already agreed upon amongst each other. But for some reason, Dad always finds a way to harass me. And although he knew that it was my 7-day consecutive week, uninterrupted as well, he stated that he was at my door at 4:30, and not only was he at my door, he had messaged me and emailed me that he had entered my home along with going in my backyard, and nobody was home. When this incident happened, I actually was home in the back part of my house, and the doors were closed to the bedroom, so I couldn't hear basically what was going on in the front part of the house. And I was very alarmed due to the fact that he actually sent me a message saying he entered my home, which in my response I had stated to him, I have told you many times before, do not enter my home. I've even sent you emails. It's trespassing. You do not have a right to enter my home. Not only is it just because, you know, he doesn't have a right to, but, you know, due to our past history, he has a tendency of coming into my hallway, and we have found recorders in the hallway. He used to cut up my sneakers and shoes with knives. So he knows he's not even to enter the main door downstairs that leads into my house. When I had confronted Dad about this situation, he felt the need to state that he did not enter my apartment. I live on in the second story of my house, and he stated that he did not enter my apartment because the apartment door was open. Now, mind you, you wouldn't be able to know that unless you walk up my stairs and enter my door. And then he proceeded to state that he had entered the common vestibule, which, mind you, I do not live in an apartment complex. I do not live in a hotel. I do not live in a college dorm to where this is an entrance that the public are allowed to come in and just hang out and wait. This is a private property. This is a home. No one, no random person, police officers and the mailman don't even enter that hallway unless they are either requested to or allowed to. So he basically tried to state the reasoning of him coming in. He was allowed to because that's a common area, and he was seeking for his son's visitation. Again, if you're not welcomed into somebody's home, you do not have a right to enter their house. No matter if it's a side hallway, front hallway door, The main entrance to their door. You don't have a right to just enter somebody's household. We pay our bills for a reason. I pay my rent for a reason. You know, I have my own privacy rights just as well as anybody else does. And that doesn't give just any random person the opportunity to say, well, because I feel like it, I'm going to open your door and just walk right in and do as I please. So we did make another report, which is included in the previous one, with him speeding down the street and basically endangering the welfare of our child. That was sent over to the Special Victims Unit as well. Including with that, also, there was a false CPS report that was made against myself and my boyfriend of 2.5 years. I'm also 6 months pregnant by him. We've been together for quite some time, and my ex-husband chose to... Sorry about the noise in the back, guys. It's a loud car. My ex-husband chose to, as he was visiting with his son one weekend, and make a CPS report that my boyfriend was beating the crap out of my 5-year-old child every time I would leave him alone. First of all, I don't leave any of my children with anybody, and even if I do, I'm pretty sure I would know if somebody was beating the mess out of my children, and I'm pretty sure out of everything that I've done in reference to his abuse towards my child, I would take immediate action in protecting my child. So that's definitely not what's going on here. My child is never been beaten. My boyfriend has never laid a hand on him or any of his other siblings for that matter. And his other siblings are much older. I have a 14, 15, 7, soon to be 18-year-old and a 19-year-old daughter. So I'm pretty sure all of them contest that nobody has harmed them or put their hands on them. And the age that they're at, even if somebody did, they would too make sure that it would have been reported and something would have been done. So needless to say, the fact that the CPS worker was willing to entertain that false statement, again, was just pretty appalling to me, especially due to all the information that has been provided to them based on Dad's actions towards my child, and even indicated reports on their behalf. And as I stated before in some of my other podcasts, CPS in their narrative, after you contact the registry, you are allowed to get so much information about a case, and while it's being investigated, they have stated in their narrative, and not just in their narrative, but I have them on recording in my house stating that they are knowingly and acknowledge that Dad should not be unsupervised around my child. So anyways, I get a phone call stating that they have to come and basically harass, interrogate, and violate our privacy rights. No, I do not take the advice of not willing to allow them to come in just because I don't need somebody adding on to whatever Dad's accusations are, or if it is brought back into court, any reason for having anyone to say anything negative about myself or my family. We have nothing to hide, and although it is invasive, there's no reason that I can't abide by explaining our side of the story as well. There's 3 sides, and I always say that. There's mine, his, and there's God's. So yes, I opened the door and I allowed them to come in. They basically explained that the report stated that, again, I leave my son unattended with my boyfriend, and while I'm gone, my boyfriend beats the crap out of my son. Excuse me. We basically, not only myself, my boyfriend, and all the children explained that is not what's going on. They proceeded to ask my kids if they had any concerns, and my children told them yes. And they explained that their only concern is when their little brother comes home with bruisings and different ways of acting, as far as, screaming, being very volatile and violent towards the other siblings, saying things that we know he either doesn't see or hear here at the house. They noticed his change of behavior, and they made sure to express that to the CPS workers. So basically, that was very short and brief. In the meantime, though, I did question CPS as far as to as you're here investigating and harassing our household again, why hasn't anything been done as far as holding Dad accountable for all the other reports that have been, put in, even with the doctor's notes indicating the child abuse? And it's amazing how I keep hearing the same workers, these same people that are supposed to be quote unquote child protection workers, continue to state that it can take a lengthy time before something's done. And even within that happening, they still probably won't take Dad's parental rights. They had advised me that they might give Dad programs to go through, which he would probably abide by and, of course, pacify the courts. We know that because that's what abusers do. He would get out of those programs and turn around and wind up seeking visitations again, which would include probably more abuse towards my child. Basically what they're saying is that he can continue abusing my child. You guys are all knowingly allowing this to happen because you haven't intervened. And then another explanation is, well, we have to take it to our legal department, and it's up to the legal department. So that conversation ended very quickly, of course. I would say about 2 days after that, the actual caseworker that was assigned to the case wanted to come to the house and interrogate, violate, harass, and what have you. Even though we just explained to the 2 workers prior to that what was going on, we had another worker come to the house. Again, the same conversation had applied, and we explained that Dad is just stirring up mess. And when does it come to the point to where that person is pegged as a nuisance, calling and making false accusations? When does it come to the point to where, you stop wasting your job and entertaining these false accusations and actually do your job and pay attention to the evidence at hand that is causing this child and inflicting this child pain and trauma? He was very brief in some of his conversations, but it seemed to be based exactly very similar to what the prior 2 workers said, which we kind of figured we weren't going to get anywhere. We had explained to this worker the numerous things that had happened prior to them even coming. Dad's actions and his behavior throughout this whole situation, which technically, even though a lot of it has been happening since the end of last summer till now, it's actually been going on a lot longer. So the harassment has continued, and it's very tiresome and it's very emotional. And there are times that I would love to just throw in the towel and give up. But these people that are put into place to protect our children and that are taking an oath, and they accept their check at the end of the week to go sit down and have a nice glass of wine or a steak dinner and a smile on their face, they can go to sleep with no problem and no hesitation whatsoever. We'll never fight for our children as much as we do. So the majority of the time I have to suck it up and deal with the harassment, not only the harassment from Dad, but sit here and sit by and know that my child is continuously being traumatized, and no matter what I've done as a parent to protect him, I feel as if not only does my child not have rights, and neither do we, which is totally unfair, because last time I knew, living here in the United States of America, we do have rights. We have human rights, we have civil rights, we have moral rights. And honestly, deep down inside, how I believe and what I raise my kids is I don't need a piece of paper. I don't need a constitution to tell me what my rights are. But it seems when the law gets in reference to child protective services or biased judges that clearly can claim immunity and get away with this. And this is why they're doing it, is because they have immunity and they feel so comfortable in handling and mishandling cases like this. We have no rights over our children. And it's like, what is the point? What is the point of trying to be a parent to protect your kids if these people could just come in and intervene and do what they want, say what they want, and strip you emotionally and morally of you doing the right thing when you have these criminals and these abusers? When does it come the point to where you say, these criminals are not the only ones that have rights? Us protective parents have rights. Us parents that have done wrong have rights. Our children have rights. Our children shouldn't have to be or worried and scared if they go with the other parent that they're going to be traumatized or abused. My son shouldn't be intimidated, or if I take him somewhere new, he's going to be scared to leave my side due to what his father has done. Which brings up another point. My son had just started his first day of school 2 days ago. We were very excited. We gassed him all up to let him know it's a safe place. He's going to make a lot of friends. He's going to play games. He's going to learn to read and write. And then he can come home and share with everybody. Like I've stated many times before, I'm very careful with what I say to my son. Even though things can be very emotional, it's not my son's fault, and I choose not to re-traumatize him. So we are cautious and gracious with our words with him. We do praise him a lot, and we do compliment him a lot because we want him to know throughout his struggle that love will conquer, and he can get through this. So his first day of school came about, and, you know, because of the whole COVID thing, it was a little crazy, but, you know, everybody was patient for the most part. It took us about an hour to 2 hours before we actually entered the school, but they had, you know, the little protocols put in place for the children to keep them safe, which I understand and respect. Typically in a normal situation, you would be able to bring your children into school and just walk them to the class, especially if it's like their first year or whatever. Unfortunately, in this situation, we were unable to do so. My son was a little scared, and then most of the part when we got right to the door, we were supposed to hand him off to one of the teachers. Now, prior to him going to school, we had a walkthrough, luckily, and we were able to explain to the school pretty much what is going on. And I choose to do that because I want people to be aware of my son's situation. I want people to understand that if he comes into class and he's extremely tired or he's misbehaving, even though he's a great kid, he's still traumatized and he's still going through a lot. So I feel it's important to notify anybody that's going to be involved in my child's life to take notice to any traumatizing situation that's going on. So I made sure that I had explained to the school prior to him coming that this incident is going on. It's been going on for a while. If you happen to see any, you know, change of behavior or anything that should be reported, please don't hesitate to call myself or Child Protective Services for that matter. They're mandated reporters. And not only that, I don't want my child to be pegged as a troubled child for no reason or misunderstood because of some of his behaviors due to what his father is doing. So again, I felt it was very important to speak to the school about what was going on. Anyways, back to his first day of school, he was a bit upset. It was very hard for him to let go of myself and his older sister. The counselor of the school had came, and when she had come, I explained to her that there's a lot going on in the situation that's causing him to act this way. She agreed that she believes that there might be something going on, and I had requested to speak to the assistant principal, who is the lady that I had pretty much informed about my situation with my son, which thankfully, even throughout all the chaos, this woman was willing to take time out to come console my son on his first day of school. They were able to take him to his class, which was great. I waited about a couple hours and was able to call the school and, you know, ask to see how he was doing. Of course, he transitioned fine. Great. Anyways, yesterday, leading up to yesterday, this is the exciting part, guys. This is the whole reason of me doing my podcast today. Yesterday, I get a phone call from this same CPS worker, and he had stated he wanted to come to the house now for the third time. Okay? He wanted to come to the house now for the third time to speak to me about about the case which Dad had called in and made the false accusations about, along with supposedly many police reports, which at that time I had no idea or recollection what he was talking about. I maybe had thought maybe he's in referencing the last couple situations that involved Dad within the last couple weeks. So I'm like, okay, fine. You have to wait till 4:30. That's when my kids come home from school. Fast forward, guy comes to my house. Needless to say, very not nice conversation. And usually I hold myself together, and usually I have respect, And I'm sorry, I've kind of had enough. This has been going on for years. I don't appreciate somebody coming into my house. Number one, I don't think any of us do, especially dealing with CPS. Number two, I don't appreciate that they're entertaining a false accusation when you're provided many, many times with proof that dad is the one that's actually abusing our child. Instead of him coming out and asking me about the initial investigation, which was dad calling and making a false report, he had proceeded to ask and question me about an incident that happened back in 2019. Now, I don't talk about this because I don't really feel right off the bat that this was part of my situation. But being that I'm doing this podcast, I'm going to explain a little bit. Back in 2019, when all this got really worse, it started to get worse. My son was coming home, every day with the bruising. It got a little emotional for myself and my boyfriend at the time because nobody was doing anything for us. And we were just like going in different directions. Our emotions were running high. And yes, we had a little incident. It was a heated argument. The children were not there at the house. They did not witness any of it. Unfortunately, a neighbor had called because they heard us screaming and hollering. Again, let me state, my children were not there. But as adults, sometimes our emotion runs high, especially in situations like this. And the cops did come. We explained to the cops, yes, we had a misunderstanding, what have you. Anyways, because the report was made, this CPS worker made it his job. Now pay attention to what I'm saying and what this snake was trying to do. He made it his job to go back a year to 2 years to try to seek a police report that was never, no one was ever charged, no one was ever arrested. There was never anything founded because there was also, after the report was made, even though CPS was open at that time against dad, we had explained what happened. They stated that because the children live in the house, even though they weren't there, that they still had to investigate and ask the kids. They did. Everything was fine. Nothing was indicated. Nothing was founded. Again, this is going on over a year, 2 years ago, okay? The fact that this worker was here originally to investigate myself and boyfriend over, and my boyfriend over a false accusation that my ex-husband had made, stating that my boyfriend beats the crap out of my son. He referenced this incident that we had a verbal confrontation amongst one another as adults. Again, no children were there. He tried to use that to put a case, make a case together against us, which I became immediately upset, and I just could not hold my composure anymore. And I pretty much cussed the dude out and basically told him what a scumbag he was, and he should be ashamed of himself and anybody else that's willing to try to put a case against the protective parent and anybody else. When you have proof, you have not just my verbal, confirmation, because that's technically hearsay. You have proof by doctors. My son is going to counseling. You know that he's in counseling because of his drastic change of behavior. You have pictures, videos, and voice recordings of dad openly admitting, if not abuse, but neglect. And yet and still, with all the police reports and CPS reports that were made, even up until now recently, you choose to dig back up into a year to 2 years later to try to put a case together in reference to just the recent call that dad made into a false accusation against us. Yeah, I think what amazed me, and I'm still baffled about it, is that you have proof that this man is abusing my son, but you're willing to try to accumulate a case against us, and you have the nerve to state, well, this is still there and we can still see the police report, but you just miraculously don't see a police report that was made not even a week to 2 weeks ago where he was endangering the welfare of my child, speeding down the street from 6 o'clock till 10 o'clock at night. Miraculously. Also, within my son going to school, the reason I brought that up is because when he was here yesterday, he stated that the school had called CPS and made a report because my son was crying. My son was crying on his first day of school, guys. I don't know, but I have 5 children, and I think only 1 out of all my 5 children was the only one that didn't cry. But the rest of them, probably about the first couple days, they cried. And if I'm a bad parent because my kids don't want to leave my side, then I guess I'm guilty of that. I love my kids. I show my kids a lot of compassion. I love them. I hold them. I praise them. Like I said, I give them compliments. I let them know that even though the world is nasty outside, that they have somebody that they can rely on. They can rely on each other, family first. We love one another. That's love. That's compassion. That's what happens. And the fact that my son acts the way that he acts is not just because of love and compassion, even though that's some of it, of course, but he is traumatized, and a new place like that is very scary for any 5-year-olds, and anybody with simple common sense would know that. So I try to explain that to this worker, including adding the, why are you investigating me over a phone call? And then when I actually called the school and I said, what happened, the school kind of laughed and was like, we didn't call on you. We called and told the worker that this was we were worried that the reason he was acting like this is because there's ongoing abuse from Dad. So that was clarified through the school, which was cool and okay. And I kind of figured that's what it was, but it was just the point. This CPS worker seems as if he's, excuse my language, got his finger up Dad's behind for whatever reason, to protect him. So anyways, let's go back to the conversation with the CPS worker. When he's here, I continue to ask him, we're not going to comment on something that happened a couple years ago that, again, nobody was indicated, no charges were pressed, nobody was arrested. It was a verbal confrontation that got a little heated amongst ourselves, and, the neighbors happened to hear and call. So we're not going to comment on that. We don't have to engage in anything like that. I continue to ask him, why are you pulling up information on us? And my boyfriend even included, what about Dad and his past history? What about Dad breaking into somebody's house and raping them? What about Dad abusing his children and having his kids taken away? How come you're not, throwing that in there? What about Dad speeding down the street? And the CPS worker, with no hesitation at all, had the nerve to state, how do you know he was speeding? Did you have a speedometer? It's simple common sense. You don't need a speedometer to prove that somebody is speeding down the street with a 5-year-old child, to the point to where an off-duty cop had to do a U-turn because he was even concerned. Not only that, why is it that nothing's been done about him speeding with my child? Again, you're willing to dig up dirt on us and try to indicate a report based off of Dad's false accusation, but you have done still nothing to protect him. Then, in the midst of all this, he had stated, how do you know your son was harmed while Dad was supposedly speeding? He might have not been physically harmed, okay? But again, back to my son being traumatized, I'm pretty sure emotionally he was confused, distraught, and scared, knowing, number one, he sees his whole family standing in the street waiting for him. Number two, he knows that Dad hasn't dropped him off. And in the midst of all this, the CPS worker had to state, well, every child is different. And I go, what do you mean by that? And he goes, well, he might just like fast cars. And I go, are you condoning the fact that Dad was speeding and endangering the welfare of my child? Is that what's going on here? Because I'm kind of confused. The last time I knew, speeding is speeding. Not only is it a traffic violation and endangering the welfare of a child, I literally almost got swiped off the freaking road. Yeah, I'm very just, I don't even know what to say anymore. Like, it's clear and evident that these people are entirely working against the protective parent. And again, like I stated earlier, when you protect your child, which you're supposed to do as a parent, and naturally anyone that cares about their children would, you are criminalized and demoralized and treated as if you're doing so wrong. If you don't protect your child, you're still wrong. I have put grievances in the CPS. I have put in 2 judicial committee complaints, which I was told with both of those that they cannot make decisions in family court, which that is not what I was asking. I was trying to prove the biasness in court and how the judge continued to deny any evidence proving that my child was being abused and continued to retaliate against me and give Dad more time I have also contacted the Attorney General's office, which in their complaint and message, they stated it's out of their jurisdiction. All right, guys, help me out here because I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Who else are you supposed to contact? What else are you supposed to do if you're doing everything? There's no contacting the media because I have contacted every media source here in Buffalo, New York. Okay. I had one that actually came to my house personally, interviewed me for an hour, took all my documentation, which I have about this thick, okay, of all my documents because I save everything. Took my documents for about a week in order for him to come back and tell me that originally he was going to do the story, but then he turned around and stated that he was not going to continue doing the story because the judge and the lawyer that I had at that time are very high in politics. Their names are very high in reference in politics. And I'm going, wow. So to me, you're basically saying you're going to idly stand by with all the evidence that I gave you and all the proof that I gave you, knowing that my child is being subjected to abuse. And you too are going to just say, sorry, not going to help. I don't know about you guys, but I see a lot of stupid crap on the news, okay? Or even TV in general. Mind manipulating, dumb influence crap that wastes so much time and space that could be literally helping other people out there. And something like this, you're not going to take? Or how about I go on the petition site, and I don't know if you guys know the little show Rick and Morty. Back in my day, it was Ren and Stimpy. I loved Ren and Stimpy back in then. But anyways, in this generation, it's Rick and Morty. So my point is, Ren and Stimpy, sorry, it's on my brain now. Rick and Morty had a petition online where they wanted to put Rick and Morty back on the show. And come to find out through my oldest daughter that she told me that they took it off of the show due to something happened inappropriately. Them gesturing some inappropriate antics towards either a baby doll or a child. And that's originally why they were taken off. I might be wrong. Don't quote me. I don't know for sure. I don't really watch it. Anyways, I seen a petition online for that, to put that show back on there. And I'm going, you got to be kidding me. So originally, my petition was actually on change.org. And it was up for about a good week. And I had a lot of great signatures for a good week. And then all of a sudden, some lady had contacted me. And she goes, I follow you, and your page or your petition is not online anymore. And she goes, the only reason why I'm contacting you is because I had a similar petition and noticed that mine was taken off. And I'm going, well, that's surprising. What the hell? You know, I didn't think I had anything in there degrading or offensive. It's for our children. It's to fight, to keep them safe. It's for child abuse victims. It's for domestic violence abuse victims. We have rights. People don't understand when somebody's in a domestic violence relationship, they don't understand emotionally what that person is going through. They're very quick to judge, and they're very quick to say, well, why don't you get out of that relationship? It's very easy for someone to not only judge a book by its cover, but to stand from the outside in and wonder why. My excuse, and sorry, but it might be an excuse, through everything and all the pain that I've gone through. Now, a lot of people don't know this, is I was taken from my biological mother as a child, and I was put in the foster care system. I was sexually and physically abused for quite some time, and then I was put in the system myself until I was 18 years old. I got in a few dysfunctional relationships, of course, because unfortunately, through growing up, you don't have the right people in your life that are willing to steer you in the right direction. Did I have to grow up myself and learn things on the journey? Yes. Do I still learn things? Of course I do. And I'm always open and willing to continue learning things. But I think through everything that I have gone through, the best thing that I can say is the best thing that had happened to me was becoming a parent. Because I didn't want my children to grow up and go through the same things that I went through. My children are my life. So they help me succeed and they help me stay strong. Doing this podcast with you guys that want to tell your stories and your testimony, you have no idea how much it helps me out. So I'm so grateful, even though I have you guys telling me thank you for what I do. I'm very grateful for all your support and you guys even reaching out. because my strength comes from your strength, also from God and from my children. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there. But anyways, you do become, victimized and systemized growing up, especially when you have had nothing but an abusive relationship yourself with either your parents or other siblings that have done you wrong, and you're not steered in the right direction. And you got to kind of grow up on your own. But, there's a saying out there that once you're in the system, you kind of never leave the system. And I do honestly, solely, hardly believe that. And I know I mentioned in one of my podcasts before, I overheard Connie Reguli, I think her name is, state how it's a generational curse or a generational, dysfunction. And it is. Unfortunately, it is. I have looked back in my past and noticed that when I have finally got a hold of my biological family, that there was quite a few times where in my family, my great-grandparents came off the boat from Sicily. So there was quite a few times where I've heard those siblings were separated from each other. Even my mother, my biological mother, she was separated from her siblings. And it just kind of goes down the line. Me and my sister were separated, even though we lived together for a little bit growing up. We were separated, and we were both put in the system as well. And now here we go. And my generation, and I have to worry about my children consistently being in the system. And I say this all the time, you think when it's over, it just begins, and that's exactly what they do. You think once they, close the case or they deal with something, they come back knocking on your door all over again. And I just continuously say that it's harassment. That's what it is, generational harassment. I don't know what the correlation is or what the defining error or situation is that these people seek certain people out. And it definitely can't be just one race, because I know for sure that's not true. I was adopted. I have 10 siblings, and we are a very multicultural family. So there's not just one race there. There are many races. Can it be pinpointed to a certain race? It might be, but that's not what the conversation is about, and I don't really think that's what the main concern is. My main concern is that these workers that come in that supposedly are supposed to be there to protect our children either falsify situations, or in my instance where I just witnessed yesterday, he was willing to dig up something to make a case to help Dad, the abuser, instead of protecting my child. And instead of doing what they need to do, and there's excuse after excuse. When you talk to these workers, they say, well, we got to go to the legal department. We go to the legal department, and then if it goes to state, speaking of which, one of the cases that Dad was indicated, I just found out yesterday, they overturned it. And when I asked why did they overturn it, his excuse was, with our program, we only need credible evidence. With the state, they need much more in order to prove a case. And I'm going, so in what case are you in referencing to? And he goes, well, I don't know, the one with his dad. And I'm going, I understand that, and I know that's what we're talking about, but if you care so much about my child, you would know in reference to what case you're speaking about. Now, before I go on further, when I start my show, I do an introduction with pictures. Those pictures are to show some of the abuse that my child has been inflicted on by Dad. In 2 of the pictures, there are bruising on his stomach. He has a pair of red shorts in one and green shorts in the other. And this is the incident he was referring to. So when he had stated, the injury to your child's abdomen, I had proceeded to get very boisterous, needless to say, and explain to him, yes, you mean the incident where my son came home with black and blue marks all over his stomach and his ribs. And when he did come home, there was no other abrasions on his knees, arms, elbows, proving that, he had fallen. This was a clear sign that somebody had whacked him, and it actually looked as if somebody had impressed something. There was an impression of something in my child's stomach. And after that happening, we actually had to go to the hospital, which they had forced him down to take an ultrasound to make sure there was no internal injuries. And with that happening, needless to say how upsetting it was, I had to hold my son down, and all my son was doing was screaming and crying, why are you doing this to me? Why are you doing this to me? And it's very, very upsetting that you have to hold your composure, of course, because you don't want to see your kids seeing you cry or upset. But to have to hold my son down knowing the abuse that he just endured, and him not fully understanding that we're trying to help him was even more upsetting. Anyways, I also proceeded to say is it's the same injury that when my son had a couple days without going with dad, it was healing, which I had taken pictures and sent to CPS. I sent to his therapist. I sent to Child Advocate Center. I also sent to my lawyer at that time. Oh, and Special Victims Unit at that time as well. Everybody was full aware of his bruising that were healing. We also tried to modify and get an order of protection immediately after that happened, and of course we were denied. My child had to go back with his dad that following Friday, and guess what? My son comes home on Sunday, and there was a re-inflicted injury to the same one that was just healing. To the same one. And this was fresh because while the other bruisings were black and blue and they were healing, these ones were green and yellow, which clearly can tell he had either done the night before or he had done right before dropping my son off. And guess what? Dad had the nerve the day he dropped my son off to have a shirt on for a United Buffalo caring and parenting class that he was associating himself with. The same day he returned my son home with new bruisings on his stomach. So I asked the CPS worker, is that the case that you're referring to? And you still didn't do anything about it. And he goes, well, yeah. And I said, oh, okay. So basically you're saying that Dad not only traumatized and abused the crap out of my son and beat the crap out of him, which could have caused him internal injury, and he was put in the hospital for it, not once but twice. You guys had indicated him, and then he went and appealed it, and it was overturned. Wow. How comforting. Isn't that comforting, guys, that you're a protective parent? You do everything that you have to do. You see your son come home with all these bruisings on him, and they have the nerve to slap you in the face and basically tell you, it's okay. It's just like they're telling you they can sit right there in the room and watch your child be abused, and there's nothing you can do about it. Wonderful. But guess what? We're all supposed to be the same parents that are supposed to keep ourselves stable, mentally sound, not retaliate, not lose our cool, not beat the living crap out of the person that is abusing your child because the law won't do anything. We're not supposed to do that. And although I get upset and might get a little boisterous, believe me, I would never jeopardize my son's life or safety or any of my other children's, because that man is a piece of crap and a scum, and I would never waste my time. Maybe I would. If he breaks into my house. If he breaks into my house, I have every right to, okay? And I'm not saying, God himself might have to hold me back and come down and restrain me, because if that man comes into my house and I catch him, I am going to take out all the anger that I have that he has done to my child. And I will call the cops myself. Matter of fact, I'll put the handcuffs on myself if I have to. But anyways, in other situations, I'm not going to seek his father out and, try to have any type of revengeful conflict with him. Anytime he comes around, I'm very pleasant, even though it hurts inside, and even though I do want to do so much because of what he's done to my innocent child, I don't, because then that would defeat the purpose of my fight. It would defeat the purpose of me doing these podcasts and my events. We can't give in to the enemy, and that's exactly what they want us to do. Not only the abuser, but these so-called programs, whether you call them law guardians, CPS worker, advocates that really truly aren't standing up for your children, because there are some out there, or guardian ad litem, I think I hear a lot of people talk about. I don't know if that's the same as the law guardians, but I hear a lot of people talk about it. I don't know, maybe somebody correct me later in the comments. So, anyways, so the outcome basically of my podcast is, yes, CPS worker was here again. They basically tried to initiate and dig up anything to make myself and my boyfriend look bad in reference to Dad's false accusation, which is sickening and appalling. Because instead of doing their job, they're willing to defend Dad, which kind of makes you wonder, And if somebody knows, please let me know, because the only thing I can think about is that it's an evil cult. And I know that sounds crazy, but like I can't wrap my mind around how you can protect a monster. How you can protect a monster with all the evidence. Again, like I said, if it was hearsay, I would understand. I'm talking out of my ass, you know, or, you know, I'm just an angry mom. I'm not, of course I'm angry, but I'm not just an angry mom. I'm providing you proof, credible, like you state you want, credible proof that this man is harming my child. He has an extensive history of it. He is a mental health, in mental health counseling, and he's been going, I was married to him for 10 years, and he was going for longer than that. He's still in it, actually. That alone right there speaks within itself, okay? Because God forbid he changes medication, and my child's there. What's going to happen with his attitude and his mood while he's in the midst of changing his medication? And why does my son have to be subjected to it? So you know he's in drug and alcohol. You know he's in mental health. You know he is a previous abuser to all 7 of his other children. You know he is had many domestic violence situations to where he has been incarcerated. He's very violent. And yet and still, with all this information, they continue to subject my child. And it's very sad, because I'm seeing a lot of stories where parents have warned the courts or warned CPS, and CPS was involved. And like many people say before, these people are federally funded. You're getting funds to protect these children, but you're doing nothing about it. You're doing nothing. It's mind-blowing, and it's appalling, and it's very sad, because my child shouldn't have to grow up like this. And not only is it affecting him, like I stated, I have 5 children in total. It's affecting my older kids tremendously. Tremendously. I got out of that situation because he was a domestic violence abuser. I divorced him. But you still have him breaking into my house or harassing me and my kids, stalking us, and everyone keeps saying that there's nothing that can be done about it. We record everything. We document everything. So anything that I say, believe me, I have backup for it. But why is nothing being done? Anyways, the conclusion to my CPS worker being here, I basically told him to F off and do not come back to my house unless you have a warrant or a judge written statement, because at this point now I do not want to have to open my door, and I don't feel that I need to continue entertaining their BS unless they're willing to help and provide protection for my son. Stop violating my rights as, you know, not only as a parent, but invading our privacy, harassing my household. Was I wrong for saying that? If I was, I can take the constructive criticism. That's fine. But I don't feel that I should have to continuously open my door. Where on one hand you're allowing and subjecting my child to abuse. You're allowing the abuser to have entitlement. I mean, you might as well give him a red carpet and the king's scepter and crown and call him God at the same time. And on the other hand, you're willing to harass a house full of not only children but a family and try to separate us. And for everything we've gone through, I give it to my other kids. They have held strong. They're very headstrong as well. But they've held strong, and they help out tremendously with my son, my younger son, and what he's going through. And they're very understandable. And we do have him in counseling. He's been in for a little bit longer than 6 months. He still has not quite yet established a relationship with that, which that's another thing people need to understand. When a child is traumatized and scared, it can take years before they open up. Many, many years. And even then, they're not going to tell you everything that's going on. So yeah, I told the worker basically to screw off, F off, excuse me, and do not come back to my house. And I said, you could either indicate the case, all based on my attitude and me trying to protect my child, which I have every right to do, and I have every right to be upset because you've done nothing. Or you can stop entertaining the abuser's BS and do your job. So that's the conclusion of that. But I felt the need to come on here and explain. If anybody happened to see the Facebook Live I did yesterday, I do apologize that the audio wasn't sufficient enough for you to fully hear everything in detail of what was going on. But I hope this kind of clarifies the conversation and helps you better understand not only my story and situation, my son's story, my family's story, and understand that this is ongoing. And yes, I'm on here, and yes, I don't mind having people tell their stories and giving them the platform. I love to do it because I think testimony is key, and I think it will help so many people. It will help people come out of the woodwork. It will give them strength. And we need to empower each other. But I'm still going through my struggle as well, too. Very much so. But you guys are not alone. I love each and every one of you guys that support everything that I do. I just want to tell everybody to keep the strength and faith in whatever you believe in. More power to you. Anyone that you know that might want to share their story, I am open at any time for you to message me. Either my profile, Tina Salinas, or you can message me directly on the We Are the Voice page. Also, I just want to remind before I close out, sorry guys, it was quite long. I want to remind everybody, my petition is on care2.com, which is to reform the family court and CPS. And this is not the typical petition that you see. This is specifically designed to protect domestic violence and child abuse victims. And some of the information in there, I just want to say, I got from either my personal experience of dealing with them or seeing some of other people's stories and hearing what they would like to see. And that is very beneficial because the petition won't just revolve around my own situation. It will help many others in their situation. So please go to care2.com. I do believe it is in the link attached to this podcast. If not, later on I will edit it in. And go and sign the petition. Tina Salinas from We Are the Voice for the Silenced and Afflicted. Love you guys. Thank you so much for your support. And I will hopefully, at the end of this week, I believe I have another parent with another story that she's kind of going through some similar situations here. Again, if you know anybody that wants to reach out to tell their story, tell them to hit me up. More than willing. Love you guys. Have a blessed day. Bye.